So, General Brown, first off, I want to say thank you to AUSA and really appreciate you hosting this great event. I'm really proud of Phil Brooks for being able to pull this together. You know, only FCO CG to be able to do that. It seems like, this topic has been a, very important topic for many years, and it took Phil Brooks coming to FCO to actually get out here and get on the hot topics menu. So, kudos to Phil. I'm a little disappointed in my good friend Les because I asked for a small adjustment for the hot topics. I asked if we could just call this a red hot topic in honor of our branch colors, ADA and FA. And he told me, nice try. But anyways, Les, I'll try again next year. So we are your last panel for the day, and then we'll be followed by a great leader, Major General Sylvia, for the final keynote speaker. But as the last panel, I think it's fitting. Integrated warfighting, sensing, targeting, offensive, defensive fires, and sustainment. I think we can do just about anything with that topic title. And I think it's appropriate because it'll give us the opportunity to kind of pull together today's conversation and really bring it home. And so, quite frankly, I look to my left and we've got a great panel with diverse perspectives, as well as roles across the defense complex. And I think that should help us stimulate some thought and dialogue on how to achieve integrated warfighting, with an emphasis on large-scale combat operations and the application of fires. It's really an opportunity, I think, also to examine some of those interdependencies that exist that enable integrated warfare, as well as, some of the required interoperability that maybe we haven't quite reached nirvana yet on. And that's between the warfighting functions as well as, across the joint force and with our allies and partners around the globe that we fight alongside. So joining me are Brigadier General Rory Crooks, our Army's Director for Long Range Precision Fires, who you all met earlier today. Next to him is Brigadier General Cain Baker, the Army's Director for Future Vertical Lift Cross-Functional Team, which includes responsibility and oversight for the requirements for launch effects, which is very relevant to our topic today. Next to him is Colonel Clay McVay. Clay serves as the Deputy Director for the Army Applications Lab, and hopefully we'll be able to share a perspective of how our Army leverages the civil industrial base to solve problems within this domain that we're talking today. And then finally, at the far end, we have with us an industry perspective from Tom Gorsuch, who serves as the Director for Business Development and Strategic Technology Initiatives at Leonardo DRS, where he leads DRS efforts on secure communications, SIGINT, cyber, and EW business development. So first of all, what I'd like to do is, rather than direct questions at you, let me go ahead and give each of the panel members a few minutes to provide a little bit of their perspective on integrated warfighting based on their unique experiences, as well as the role they play in their specific organizations. So I'll start here to my left here with General Crooks, please.
Thank you, sir. What I like to do, by the way, I told Cain earlier that I talked you up, and so we're really counting on you to pull this one through for this panel. So what I like to do from my perspective as a fire supporter, and I've been a fire supporter at, I think, every echelon from company all the way up to division FISCORD, is to, what's the common denominator? Lay out what the foundational common denominator is for integrated warfighting. And it comes back to a commander at echelon. You may have heard the Secretary of the Army say, in reference to the Indo-PACOM AOR, the Army brings to the Joint Force really thick layers of commanders and staff to help us frame and solve problems. And we do that at echelon through something called a targeting process. So we talked a little bit about the relevance of data and what that means to sensing in panel 2. I want to sort of frame that a little bit different, bring it back to a commander, because a commander is who owns the risk. We're early here, sorry. Thanks, Greg. A commander owns the risk in terms of risk to force and risk to mission. And sometimes, particularly with our protection assets, the commander is responsible for risk of inactivity. So if you fail to do something that has consequences that come back to a commander. All that to say, a commander solves these problems at echelon using processes like the targeting process. And again, behind me, you'll see I got to use some ops graphics again, and it's a simple chart, but I'll hopefully frame what it is we do with targeting. Targeting really, there's a doctrinal definition. I think what resonates with me is what it does for a commander. Now, a commander owns resources. A commander has authority to use resources, and the commander owns the risk, essentially, when it comes down to that. Because of that, a commander prioritizes the use of all available resources and coordinates them in time and space to achieve a desired outcome or effect. And that's really all targeting is bringing all these resources to bear against a prioritized set. If you look at the gray box at the bottom there, however you say it, if you like the process of decide, detect, deliver, assess, T3A, great. I put it in a really nondescript terms. You have to prioritize what outcomes you're trying to achieve as a commander. You must bring to bear your resources to acquire those relevant formations or capabilities you want to achieve an outcome on. You must engage that formation or capability, and you have to assess whether or not you actually achieve the outcomes you're looking for. So using my FM 101-02 again, if you check from left to right, the red box, that diamond there, that is a target. That is an enemy formation. And that's really what we're trying to achieve an outcome on in discrete terms, beginning and discrete terms. Below that, you'll see a rectangle or a square that it has a small letters NAI, TAI, named area of interest, targeted area of interest. You must bring the resources to bear to detect that target, to find the target, so that you can, as you then move up to the cross there, so that you can actually affect the target, bring your resources to deliver that effect to bear. And oh, by the way, don't forget, because integrated warfighting goes all the way to the sustainment end, something that looks like a bullet right above the rectangle there, the square. That is, you must have your supplies where they need to be, not only your platforms, but your ammunition. If you're artillery, you know that if you're only tracking your platform, you're only tracking half of your capability. Where your ammunition is matters. And then that check mark at the bottom, that's battle damage assessment. Did you do what you were supposed to do to achieve the outcome you wanted for a commander? When you bring all those together, and it's just to the right of that yellow arrow there, when you bring them all together, you got the logistics where it needed to be, you detected that high payoff target that your commander decided, you brought an effect to bear, and then you achieved the outcome that you're looking for. That's success. That's mission. You solved the problem for your commander. And that really is what we do targeting for. Again, resources, bringing together, prioritizing. This is hard, and I use analog graphics to show we've been doing this for a long time. It is hard, but what you can't see it very well is that when we actually have data that is common to everyone, that is accessible to every one of these resource stakeholders, it starts to make it somewhat easier problem to solve. And when you look at industry has actually solved this problem in some ways. So if you don't believe me, there's a company you may have heard of called Amazon, right? And if you look at the weirdest customer in the world is the red diamond there, because that customer doesn't want a thing or something of value. That customer wants to be limited in their choices and denied the use of their capabilities. So if you think that as a customer, I know that's weird, but that is who you're trying to find. You're trying to then do market research. That's where, going back to the rectangle square, you're trying to do market research to find out, how do I find that customer? You know, what is it about that customer behaviors that I can use to bring that to bear? And then you go up to the cross, and where And I look at that as the Amazon secret sauce of the order fulfillment center, right? If you can just bring the resources that are nearby to bear and against that customer who says they want something, and you also have local suppliers, that's what the bullet thing there is about. Because you have access to all these data, you can fulfill that mission. In Amazon's case, it's to deliver goods of value. For our case, it is to deny the use of a capability, or to achieve the ultimate. You take that to the nth degree, and you destroyed the target, and that they have no more use of their capabilities thanks to that. And then if you look at the check mark there, which was for us BDA, battle damage assessment, that's to see if your customer was satisfied. We have algorithms for all of this today, and because we have the ability to bring all that data together, sort through it, apply AI and machine learning to help us do that, we have the ability to do targeting potentially faster, which is what we need to scale and get faster in the speed of our fires for large scale combat operations. So if industry sort of has a solution, we just need to be able to, as an institution, figure out how to harness this better. So that again, Commander is the bottom denominator, integrated warfighting. And a commander uses a process called targeting. One other thing I'm going to show you before I advance the slide is there's something also new and different within Futures Command that we're trying to leverage, and that is autonomy. I talked a little bit about autonomy in panel 2. We have autonomous platforms that are emerging, and the technology is maturing on these that allow us to do things that we couldn't do before. So go ahead, next slide. Thanks, Craig. Before we talk autonomous systems that are common platforms, I want to make sure I highlight the words up there, support relationships. Because if you're artillery, you understand, and if you're logistics, you understand why we have support relationships. When you can't have enough of that capability that everybody owns one and they can use it at their discretion, then we have to come up with a bargain called a support relationship, which is, hey, we never keep artillery in reserve. If some brigade is off the line, not in contact, we're going to take that artillery battalion and it's going to go move forward in a direct support, general support sort of capacity. It will get used, right? So we never keep these things in reserve. But what if we have common platforms that can do multiple missions? What if you have a platform that's, because it's autonomous and it's in a class of supply that's either on the slide here, a 5-ton, which we have now an autonomous multi-domain launcher. It reaches technology readiness level 6. It was used at our Valiant Shield 24 in the Indo-PACOM. It fired 2 PRISM missiles. So it is a capability that is emerging that we think not only has implications for preemptive offensive fires, but potentially defensive reactive fires if we can put other munitions on top of this, which is really nothing stopping us from doing that. There's a few things we have to, don't get me wrong, we haven't solved all the problems or else we'd roll these out the door from a factory tomorrow. We are in alignment to solve the problems because of the direction that General Rainey, the direction that the chief has us going with data-centric solutions for next generation C2. We'll be able to get a common data convergent fire C2 and fire control systems that may allow us to have platforms in a 5-ton class like the AML that's common, that could have integrated fire protection capability, FPIC. It could have clearly MFOM munitions, MLRS family of munitions. And then if you look at the class on the low bottom right of the slide here, we're calling it objective launch system, but it is a 10-ton class. And this is the secret sauce of this, I guess, is that this is a palletized, self-contained launcher. You can put 4 MFOM pods on this. You could put 8 Patriots on this. If you had the brains resident on the platform, now it can be a common launcher for both offensive and defensive fires. And getting back to sustainment, because these are parallel and designed with logistics classes in mind, you've already solved the problem of tactical and strategic mobility on these things. So we also think if something's palletized, what an easier way of resupplying yourself if it's just a matter of getting the right pallet where it needs to be. Again, not easy problems to solve, but sort of in line where we think we can and should go with that. And before I turn the table over, or the mic over to Cain Baker on this, we think the same can apply with launched effects. So whether you call them one-way attack UASs, loitering munitions, all of them have specific definitions based on their behaviors, or just drones. Launched effects, we think, has both offensive capability, sort of if it's a poor man's Air Force, it has air-to-ground capability. And it also has air-to-air capability, or surface-to-air, however you want to look at it, if you're firing from the ground. With launched effects being both offensive and defensive in nature, we again see some commonality that autonomous systems, autonomous platforms will allow us to do. Because if you have a crewed system, whether it's a HIMARS crew or a Patriot crew, and you have an autonomous common platform, depending on what the commander needs, if the commander needs protection more in this part of the battle, he's going to pull that autonomous system over to the defensive, to the protection mission. If we scale up, our fires get more offensive as conflict initiates, then you move those autonomous platforms, you load them up with MFOM munitions, and now you're firing something that's more preemptive or offensive in nature. And having them all be, compatible, automatically built in with logistics, you have the ability to help consolidate gains and move these things depending on where you are in the battle without having to take crews and have them do a different mission. It's just a crew adopting an autonomous platform and taking it over. So with that, appreciate it, and I'll turn over to Cain Baker.
Not sure what Rory said earlier about me. A little bit depressed. I'm an Auburn grad, and we didn't play too well this past weekend in the Iron Bowl. Did I get an Alabama hand up there? The surprise. I'll take questions at this time. So, no, I appreciate being able to join the panel. We were up here a couple months ago, part of the Aviation Forum, and had a chance to talk about what aviation is doing in the future. But we didn't really have a good array of fires sitting up here, Sustainment. And I think this really broadens the opportunity to talk about what we're doing with Future Vertical Lift. So everybody's like, hey, why is Cain Baker up here with Future Vertical Lift? Don't you own Flora? You kind of owned FAR at one point, and then you own Future Tactical UAS. Well, that's true. But at the very beginning of all that was launched effects. And, today I'll talk about where we are in the program, where we're moving to, and really start addressing some of the autonomy that Rory talked about. That's a game changer on the battlefield. But for launched effects, we knew about 5 or 6 years ago in our high fidelity modeling that the commander needed ability to sense at range, a survivability, aspect that they could operate, inside of echelons of the enemy, to not only be able to sense, also be able to target and to rapidly pass that information back to a commander to do a lot of things that Rory was just talking about to be able to affect the enemy. So through the high fidelity modeling, we determined a capability we needed to operate at a lower altitude, operate inside of specific bands against the enemy, to be able to get in and be able to sense against very high-end targets. So we began developing this thing called launched effects, and where it's matured to in the last couple of years are really 3 categories of launched effects. We categorize them as short, medium, and long. That short, out to about 40 Ks, our medium out to about 100, and our long range to about 200. And those distances extend. Those are really just the lower bottoms of ranges. And then, looking at the gaps of where commanders right now have a hard time of sensing and where they need that lethality, we've kind of aligned them to echelon. And so your short range fits into that brigade level capability. Medium range, your division commander, and that's where Rory and I work together a lot, as they see gaps in a medium range for division commanders, and then your long range for your core and your MDTFs. About a year ago, initially launched effects, we had it coming off of aerial platforms, rotary wing UASs, and then we realized, hey, this is a tremendous capability to give a ground commander. And so we updated the ACED back in June, took it to the chief, got approval, and then we did both ground and air launched effects, really agnostic of platforms. And we also added lethality to it. What we envision launched effects is not multiple types of DODAX sitting out in ammunition holding areas, but those three categories that you can easily give to a ground commander, an aviation roll up to it, say, hey, I need some medium range or I need some long range capability. And then we're able to employ that. Tied to launched effects in that update, we also knew there were some other critical aspects. When you start talking the ranges that we want to be able to sense that and be able to communicate that target data back, we needed to understand our waveform characterization. So we've done a lot of work in the past year with specific vendors inside of contested environments, looking at how we're going to manage waveforms. The other piece was autonomy. Autonomy is critical. And, when you look at where not just the Army, but all services are going with autonomy, I tell, and I think Troy Dennemy's still in the room, autonomy is at the heart of how we're going to balance out our formations. Typically, I have a slide up here. It shows a man formation, and it shows our autonomous formations. We don't have two different armies sitting in two different parts of the world that's just going to do autonomy and it's going to do our man capability. They've got to come together, and we got to optimize that in a manner that we can be able to fight, deliver capability on the battlefield. And autonomy is going to do that, and it's going to do it through collaborative behaviors. We don't need, soldiers doing one-to-one type control with our launched effects. We don't need it for our UAS systems. We need our operators to be able to operate multiple things in the air at once. And I can talk a little bit about that, what we just saw at our recent experimentation. But when you look at launched effects, and it's a very cross-cutting capability in the Army right now, because launched effects are not only just the platform, it's the payload, it's the network extension, it's the onboard software, it's the launchers that have to be developed based off of where we want to launch it from. So I spent a lot of time, working with Rory, working with Bill Parker, working with the Intel Center, working with the Maneuver Center as we deliver this capability. And so, just yesterday in a brief with Army senior leadership, I continue to state launch effects is the most cross-cutting component we have now in the military because the interdependencies involved have a very long trace across the Army and are really across the joint force. Now, where we're moving in the next year with launched effects, inside of the ASALT, PO aviations, and missiles in space, we've got efforts in the short range. We've got a special user demonstration getting ready to come to a unit by third quarter, where we're actually going to bring devices from 3 competitors, give it to that unit down at the operator level, and then also have training aspects at the brigade level inside of the fire cell. So we understand how we're going to actually plan for these, how we're going to push the data, how we're going to receive the data, and how that really all correlates back to the targeting process. And then that'll culminate in some type of collective training environment at the brigade level. Medium range, we're still ongoing with the rapid prototyping that we do inside of PO aviation. That will continue for the next 12 to 24 months. And then for the long range aspect, we're working very closely with the Marines on what they have as a capability. I just brought them out to an experimentation out west as they showed a lethal aspect of that. But at the end of the day, launched effects gives that commander to be able to sense, to be able to target, and to be able to truly have offensive and defensive fires. And the results that we're starting to see from this is, one, the increased survivability on our formations when you introduce launched effects into the fight. And then, secondly, probably even more powerful, is increases that overmatch capability with our artillery capability, both rocket and cannons. So I'll hold from there and hand it over to Clay.
Thanks, sir. So I'll introduce the organization I work for real quick, and maybe we can see a common thread emerge amongst our our opening remarks. The Army Applications Laboratory, one of its primary roles is to expand the defense industrial base. And we do that by leveraging the civil industrial base. So if you look back in the early 1960s, most of the research and development that occurred within the US economy was funded by the federal government. And over time, since that time to 2022, it is now 78% of R&D that occurs within the US happens or is funded by private industry. And so we really want to take the technology that is really outpacing the defense's ability to keep up and bring that into the defense industrial base, or into the organizations that we're working for. General Crooks' remarks were spot on. Amazon is solving a lot of the problems that we face, not just as he highlighted with targeting, but also within sustainment. I'll also, so AAL is also primarily a problem-solving organization. So we heard that this morning, General Rainey likes to present industry with the problem as not as much as the capability that he's looking for to solve this problem. And so what we do is we go out to the different units within the Army that have specific problems. We sit down with them and try to understand what it is that they're working through. And then we go back to industry, we write solicitations and advertise that problem and have companies come work with us that want to help us figure out innovative ways to solve those challenges that our warfighters face. The last thing I'll say, we are part of Army Futures Command. We're down in Austin, Texas. We share a workspace with a for-public incubator startup space. And then in that same building, we have the other sister services innovation organizations as well, AFWorks, NavalX, and then the Defense Innovation Unit, DoD's innovation arm. So thank you.
Okay, so someone thought it'd be funny to have an RF geek on this panel. So, and I didn't come out of the fires community, but I am a fires support organization. This is what I do. So, and when I meet you, I'm more likely to evaluate your RF signature than I am your fashion choices. So that's what I do. I've dedicated my life to this. So what is that? It's EW, SIGINT, ELENT. So I understand RF signatures and then communications, all forms of communications. And so it's been talked about a lot today is whenever someone uses the term integrated, we heard it about 1,000 times today. What they mean is data sharing, and data sharing happens through communications. That's what I do. A big part of our business is intel broadcast. So we're broadcasting target launch detect, target detection, identification, missiles, missile tracking hypersonics, and getting all that data to these fires platforms. And so one of our biggest customers is missiles in space, for instance. So all these platforms that we've been talking about today use that type of communications. We're also heavily involved in HMIF type of sensors, team sensors or teamed platforms. And another thing talked about a lot today is AI, and kind of the way it's talked about is there's this AI thing that's going to help us. But I guess I'd like to explain a little bit the way we're integrating AI is in a given platform, there's many AIs, many different models that are running. Your camera has AI, your EW sensor has AI, your radar has AI, your narrow field of view, your wide field of view, your effector has AI, and your comms have AI. When I say comms AI, I mean deciding which communications channel to use at any given time takes some kind of intelligence. So all those things are little AI engines that are running, and they're probably already in your platforms and in places. And then there's the higher level AI that's fusing all that data together. And so you have to have the data put into a form that can be used by other sensors, and that's where open standards come in. So we do all that kind of stuff. And you have all this AI, and then you have human in the loop or human on the loop. And human on the loop brings target information up to you very quickly, and you decide human in the loop means the machine can't decide what to do. So you have to actually get more involved to make some decisions. So we're doing all those kinds of things. And I guess one last plug, because it hasn't really been talked about a lot, is that the communications that your fires platforms are all using are all constantly being modernized. And so you have to think about that. In a large scale conflict, you're going to find that some of the comms that you've relied on in the past are now compromised. And we know what those things are. And there's evolving cryptos, there's evolving waveforms, there's evolving modalities. We're launching new satellites for different intel broadcasts. And so your terminals that are in your fires platforms all have to be keeping up. And so I just kind of want to advocate for making sure that the communications doesn't get left behind when you're thinking about fires. So thank you.
All right, thanks to the panel. I think as I listen to the different perspectives here, one thing that comes to the front is, first off, it's great to see the level of interaction and collaboration between different elements of AFC, between the COEs, the CFTs, realizing that the problem to be solved is bigger than any one COE or CFT, and it kind of highlights that sense of interdependence that we have in order to, really bring fires to bear the way General Crooks highlighted on his cartoon. So my thought, my first question really is to the panel at large, and we'll start with Rory and kind of make our way back. When we think about what's required to really achieve this level of integration that we aspire to, what do we see as the major obstacles that are getting in the way, whether that's a technological solution, process, or otherwise? Just your thoughts on what are the things right now that seem to be getting in the way of the actualization of what we aspire to here with integrated warfighting.
Hey, sir, I'll start with the problem at hand that is one we're trying to solve through something called C2 fix. So the systems that we have that we currently fielded that if we fight tonight, we're gonna fight with. They expect data in a certain way, and as we try to make systems that were created for the right reasons at the time, in really siloed ways for those warfighting functions or for those specific users, as we try to get those to interoperate and integrate their data, it's really challenging. And you've heard standardization of format, message formatting and whatnot. That is a technique. It's really, really hard. But there are certain technologies that we think are emerging that are going to help us, maybe not in truly as, quote unquote, data centric ways, but ways that we can really take one form of mil standard message and through a translator that is something called Joint Common Data Services, JCDS, for example. It has a repository of all the mil standard messages. So if you have an incoming mil standard message, one-time low code is able to translate into another mil standard message, and now you're running, right? You just do that one-time low code, and now that message transfer from one format to another can happen. That's not really data centric. That's something that we're looking to allow us to fight tonight. But where we want to get to is to introduce capabilities, whether they're fires C2 capabilities or others, that are truly data centric, that allow us to pass data, meaningful data, the data that we think is relevant at machine speeds without human intervention. And that is in the form of a microservice. So, maybe that chart I showed you before, maybe that all becomes a microservice or a series of microservices that work together. That is, if you read the top of that slide title, it's data-centric targeting. If you have microservices that can pull all the relevant data, that can pull the data that are relevant to detecting that target, and data relevant to this nearby supplier, and the data relevant to whether the conditions are met in terms of legal considerations, right? Collateral concerns. Those microservices, if they have that data available, will be able to pull that together for us. we're a ways off from that, but we're on the right track. I'm confident to getting there. That's one of the main ones at this time.
Yeah, I think there's two parts, and I won't harp on the network requirements. So, I'll go back into launch effects. Network is absolutely critical to have these systems out there operating. But and we're building up capability with Next Gen C2 to be able to thicken that network and bring all those stovepipes of information together to bear so commander can see all that data. One part that we look hard at is autonomy, but specifically collaborative behaviors on these capabilities. And this could be a launch effect, or it can be inside of an HMI formation. We just finished our experimentation event that we do yearly out west, and we look specifically at collaborative behaviors, what's currently in industry and what's side of DoD. And we were surprised. We saw min-viable capability and ability to pick flight routes, fly those flight routes inside of swarms and individual swarms and groups of swarms. We saw great capability of payload management and sensor management on those systems being driven by autonomy with that capability on board. We saw a great tip and cue between systems and them targeting and them talking to each other. But the areas that we saw that we still have a lot of work to do is, I'll just call it contingency type operations. In other words, actions on contact. When it meets a threat and it doesn't know what that threat really is, and how does that system operate? How does it maneuver away from it? How does it find another route path to get into a better angle of attack? That's one area specifically just on collaborative behaviors. But if you take a step out, you ask yourself a broader question is, how is the Army going to manage these libraries of collective behaviors? How do you manage it? At home station, how do you sustain it? How do you pay for it? How do you keep it upgraded? How do you keep it moving forward based off the threat changing around globally? How do you do that in the field? So, as we move forward, in this, there's a big piece that the Army is going to have to start to understand from, hey, how do we fund it? How do we continue to maintain it? And then how do you bring it on to legacy systems and to future systems? And so that whole piece on autonomy and collaborative behaviors is one area that I think that we're working hard on, but we've got a lot more work to do.
10 years ago, the Army was really striving to create commonality across its formation types, and then to have modularity so that we could unplug and plug in different units. One of the challenges we're going to face is the need, as we bring these new capabilities on, how do they incorporate with legacy systems or systems that haven't yet been updated to the new modern versions? And then how do we do that across the entire Army, where you have the units that are receiving the new capabilities and those that aren't? And then as that fielding occurs, where new systems are rolled out, how do we go back to the first units that received it and continue to iterate with the latest and greatest technology? General Rainey's taken an approach on he wants to do tranche-based fielding for a lot of the things that are rolling out, where we get something to the soldiers' hands immediately, and then we continue to do the development to increase the technology, and then we go back and we replace that new technology. And the challenges for integrating then are, how do we do that rapidly and effectively while still maintaining that fight tonight capacity?
No, I'll just add a little bit to what General Baker was mentioning. I think the biggest challenge with AI isn't does AI work or even policy. It's how do you manage the model and the data that's training the model, and how do you distribute that as you're learning, and can it learn with anomalies, which was talked about earlier. But that's a massive challenge, and it's not really a challenge that the industry can solve. Where we can give ideas, but the Army has to own the model and own the data and own the training and own the distribution. And there's efforts going on to accomplish that, but it's a huge challenge. So,
Tom, I want to pull the thread just a little bit more on this idea. We've talked about autonomous launchers, autonomous capabilities. There's active efforts ongoing now with the human machine integrated formation. All that requires another level of data and also the ability to communicate between platforms, where each of those platforms, might end up residing. Can you maybe a little bit from your perspective on, any challenges that you see need to be overcome for HMIF to become realizable, a force multiplier to improve, improve defensive and offensive fires? I mean, your thoughts looking at this from the industry side.
Yeah, so you can't rely on any just one communications mode. You have to have multiple communications modes. So it's PACE, but it's not just primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. There's probably 10 communications modes that you need. And your system has to be able to decide which ones are working, which ones aren't working, which ones should I use in a certain A2AD environment. What is the quality of service? What are the different types of data that are being moved across these data links? So you have these robotic vehicles and a command vehicle, and you've got this command link that's got to have a high priority of service, because if you lose that command link, then the robotic vehicle is sitting still. You need to move sensor data around, because you're not getting a multiplication of force if you don't have the formation sharing sensor data. You can't share all the data. You can't have the camera feed from every robotic vehicle coming back to the command vehicle. That it couldn't even be used. So what you need is the robotic vehicles to be, boiling that data down to the essential information that needs to be passed. And that has a different quality of service and ability to get across the links as well. So you have to manage all of those things. And before I started working on this, I did a lot of similar work in the cellular world, where we have in your pocket, everyone has a mobile phone that has 4 or 5 modes of communication, everything from Bluetooth to Wi-Fi to 3G, 4G, 5G, all those things. You don't realize any of that is what's going on there, but your phone is making decisions all the time about which mode to use based on what operator you have and how much it's going to cost the operator to deliver that data to you, and what the data is, and how much data you've used this month. That starts to throttle back your data. All those kinds of decisions are happening. So yeah, commercial industry has been solving these things for a long time, and I did a lot of work in that. But it's the same kind of problem, except more mission critical. So I don't know. Hopefully, I got to the answer there.
Thanks, Clay. I guess you got some fans out here in the audience that have had a chance to visit your organization. They're kind of impressed by the agility that's displayed by what is admittedly a small organization. But your thoughts on, any lessons you've learned, as part of that organization, on how you're helping the Army identify opportunities, I guess is probably the best way to say it, to bring in capabilities to solve some of the problems that we're talking about in achieving integrated warfighting.
Thank you. So I do recognize many that get the opportunity to attend our Vertex events. We hold 3 a year. Within those events, we really strive to message to those attending what it is that the Army needs help on. And specifically, like we just finished one 2 weeks ago that was focused on the next generation command and control network. And part of that was the C2 fix problem, mostly focused though on the C2 next. Where do we need help? The next one we have in February is on advanced autonomy. And then the one in July is on launched effects. So you can see, obviously, our higher headquarters is directing us towards their priorities. So we do, before we go to those sessions, where we spend 2 days meeting with industry and outlining what our requirements are, and to help industry literally shape the requirements that we're writing. We do spend time, and we go to an installation throughout the U.S. We sit down with soldiers that are focused in that area, and we hear it from their perspectives, everyone from the E4 up to the senior warrant officers, and then we've had commanders sit down with us too, and we try to describe in their words back to industry what those pain points are. And so that's one way. And then given our mandate to really go after the companies that don't know how to work with defense, not only do we post solicitations on sam.gov, We do large social media presence pushes to help access those companies that maybe aren't looking on those websites, and to know, hey, there's an opportunity here that you may have solved, that the Army really wants that technology brought in. And so we'll point people that way, and then we'll work to Sherpa those companies to help them through that process.
Okay, I do have one question here from the media, so I'll go ahead and give it a try. And this one's directed to you, General Crooks. What is the difference between Gimler's ER and Gimler's XR? And how much difference is the range and the capability? Where is Gimler's XR in the development process? And when will it become a program of record? If you can speak to any of that, realizing that we are on record.
Yes, and I'll because of that, I'll use generalities. So guided MLRS, extended range, Gimler's ER. That is a capability that's going to deliver in the next few years. Again, if you want more details on that, I would recommend that you talk to PEO Missiles in Space. Colonel Guy Elverton was on the first panel. He can give you more detail on that. But that is essentially taking what our current ranges are for guided MLRS and doubling them. All right. Once again, within the Palm years, that will deliver as a capability. Extreme range, XR, guided MLRS extreme range, that really will double the ER range. So it will quadruple essentially the range of our current capable guided MLRS ranges. That is still an S&T. I couldn't tell you when and where that's going to deliver, but yeah, it is exciting from an operational standpoint to think that back when I was a battery commander on the Korean Peninsula, we could really only hope to achieve like 35 kilometers with our MLRS, and now that's barely brigade level ranges, right? So we've since got out to the 80 plus kilometer ranges for guided MLRS, and the fact that we are going to field something that doubles that, you can do it, for a pod, MLRS family of munitions, a pod that, used to hold 1 ATACMs that could get you that far. Now for extreme range, you could have 6 in one pod. That's pretty exciting. I mean, the payload's smaller, but that's pretty exciting to get out to those ranges. And I hope that was the tie-in to this panel, but otherwise it was just an interesting question.
Well done. This one's really directed primarily at General Baker, but feel free for others if you think you've got something to add. But you mentioned earlier working with the LRPF CFT to solve some of the division fires gaps, and I wonder if we could pull the string just a little bit on how launched effects can facilitate both offensive and defensive fires at echelon. We got some of that in your initial comments. I just wonder if you could pull the thread just a little bit, because I think it highlights some of these interdependencies that we need to be comfortable with. And quite frankly, if we're going to fight in an integrated fashion, we've got to actually leverage those interdependencies. So your thoughts on that, Cain?
Yeah, that's appreciate that. So a lot of studies that's occurred over the last couple of years that Rory and I are a part of, and Rory's team and my team working together. We see this gap. And got a division commander here that he could either agree or disagree. He's got a gap on, hey, how far can I sense? How far can I understand where the enemy is? And then when can I have an effect on that enemy? Specifically before that enemy begins providing lethal fires back on their own positions. And so as you look at the medium range capability, that ability to get out 100 kilometers and beyond with multiple payloads. When I mean multiple payloads, I'm talking RF type capability, both in the EW attack space and the EWS, a DILR capability, an EOIR capability, and a decoy capability. And then you tie some lethality in there also inside of that swarm. It gives the commander to be able to really shape the battlefield for their division. And so how do you get that inside of a formation? And you know, what we're looking at right now is where should it reside? Should that be in a fires brigade? Is that somewhere, you know, down in a BCT that can maintain it? But how do you give that tool at the division level so they can truly extend capability, not only with lethality inside of that swarm, but also increase their lethality by being able to pass that target data back very rapidly to their fire cell so they can actually have an effect on their targeting process. And then the critical portions that we're worried about inside of that gap is not just stationary targets, but moving targets, which I think we all know we have a big gap in understanding where our moving targets are and how quick we can prosecute that capability.
No, I actually, yeah, I was going to say this for the closing comments, but to Cain's point, this idea of local fire superiority, the idea of being able to maneuver fires to a position of relative advantage and thereby deliver, you know, preemptive lethal fires with some mass, that very much depends on launched effects. You know, we've done the analysis, as Cain alluded to, that if left to our own devices, trying to overcome gaps that we've seen out to 2035 in terms of range, capacity at echelon by our adversaries with surface fires, and survivability when it comes to mobility, primarily. That if we don't have launched effects and we are seeing the effects of the adversary or enemy's use of launched effects, it's going to be very hard to succeed in achieving some kind of local near parity and local fire superiority. So relying upon launched effects that have both a capacity for offensive and defensive fires is really going to help us, I think, in pretty dramatic ways. Not to get too dramatic.
Okay, with the remaining 5 minutes, I think we'll do a lightning round. So, you know, 1 minute or less, and I'm going to start at the opposite end of the table since General Crooks just used his what he had preloaded for his last closing comments. But any closing thoughts, parting thoughts as we close out the panel?
So I'll just iterate. I think there was a lot of talk about the adversary having a changing environment, but it's important to realize that our modalities have to also be changing, right? They have to be adaptive to the environment, and that's where you need the multiple modalities, and you need, you know, smart decisions, and it's a complicated thing. So anything that we think that they can do, we have to do better. That's just the way it is. And anything that they can do, you know, I think we do better, but it's a constant challenge. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate you know, the AUSA putting on this symposium and the hot topics. It's very important to us. So thank you.
I too am appreciative of AUSA for inviting us and letting us discuss. So I've been in my role at the Army Application Laboratory for about 18 months. I can say from the time that I joined to where we are today, the amount of interest that venture capitalists are having in joining and helping us solve some of our warfighting challenges has increased. Just this past weekend, we talked to some folks out in Silicon Valley who have never really dived into defense and want to know where to get started. And I think there's lots of ways to do that, but one of the ways is to partner with the large defense primes, is to help find these companies, bring them and use your powers of integration so that we can get them in the Army and get that best technology into soldiers' hands. The AI is advancing fastest in the commercial space as opposed to the defense. So that's one place that we can leverage. Thank you.
It's just, you know, great opportunity. And, you know, only thing I'll just highlight is, you know, our partnership with industry is critical. And, you know, we've said it a lot before, but we would not be where we are today without that partnership. And, you know, I would just continue to offer the dialogue is critically important. More importantly, the dialogue from industry to tell us hey, you've got it wrong. You know, let us know that, hey, you're over defining your requirement. Hey, simplify it for us. And then the other piece is just be an honest broker. A lot of the capability that we want, min viable capability exists today, and we've got to get it out to formations quicker than sooner than later. And so letting us know that, and then your participation in events like Edge and Pentax and Vanguard and PCC, that is where we see a lot of capability. And what we've got to do now is take that and quickly get it out to the field so we get that user feedback and then integrate on it over time. So thank you.
All right, you done? Save rounds? All right. Good job. All right. Hey, first off, again, I want to say thank you, General Brown, for hosting this hot topic, and to my good friend Les, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your efforts on this front.